Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Hey Newberry Fishing. As always today, we're just going to talk about some stuff that I got on my mind about bass fishing. I was in there making a few jigs just now, looking up some stuff, just what us fishermen do every day. You're looking at tournaments, tournament results, all that different stuff. Thinking about the Sabine River tournament, which we're going to talk about that a little bit too. Thought that was a super interesting tournament with the way the year has gone. You didn't see a lot of live scoping. You didn't see guys really looking at their units much at all in that tournament. There's a lot of shallow fishing. If you guys aren't aware and haven't followed the channel for years, I actually used to live down there for about 10 or 11 months. I lived down in Texas. I actually fished. My little local water area was Dickinson Bayou. That was where Summerall ran on day one. He called it Dickerson Bayou, but he was over by the Clear Lake area over there, and he ended up going to what he called Dickerson Bayou, which was Dickinson Bayou. And me personally, living in that area for about a year, knew that he was screwed when he went over there because the conditions weren't right. I fished over there a ton. I fished over there all the time. What I would do is I'd go out and I'd get the morning bite when the tide was coming in, going out, whatever. And either way, I would catch the tide coming in, coming out, and I would literally go home in between there. And his problem was that he was having a 2-hour run to get over there, so he got over there after the bite was over, and then he was in that slack water, and you can't get bit over there in that. If you do, it's so random, and you'll never catch any more than maybe one random one. If you get bit at all, it gets so tough when that happens. So I was watching when he made that run over there, and he was making predictions that he might catch a big one over there, which there are some decent fish in that area of the bayous and stuff, but yeah, I knew he was doomed when I saw that he was over there that time of day, and he had a 2-hour run back, so he couldn't stay for the good bite in the afternoon. But yeah, those areas, if you're ever down in that part of the country, if you can catch like a storm pushing in that just like kicks a whole bunch of water back in or out of those bayous, that's when you go to those. But don't go there before then, you'll have a horrible day. Anyway, thought it was a really cool event. A lot of shallow fishing, a lot of stuff that I like to do, kind of relatable stuff that I've done before, and thought it was what everybody wanted to see. Everybody talks about that they don't want to see the live scope, they don't want to see all the people just looking at their units, and I want to see more of these tidal water fisheries now, thinking about what we watched, and that it sucks when you have to fish those tournaments. As the tournament guys, those guys, I'm sure half of them were having a tough time, just because if you're all about catching bigger fish, that's not the place to be. You will on the right day get quite a few bites in some of those places. I mean, you look at I think Welcher, one of the days I was watching it was mid-morning, he was at like 17 fish or something like that. So there's a lot of bites to be had. It's not one of those types of tournaments where guys aren't catching necessarily a lot of them. It's just that a 4-pounder is pretty scarce. But anyway, kind of talking through all that led me into some thoughts about what I had talked about a couple videos ago, and it's that people were talking about how Livescope is just winning all these tournaments. Livescope's winning all the tournaments. Livescope, and it has won a lot of tournaments this year. But my point is that it's really tough to control the size of bites. So the fact that Livescope has won in a few tournaments this year doesn't necessarily mean that the entire top 10 were Livescopers. It could have been that the Livescopers maybe landed all their fish, and one of the guy in second didn't land all his, or the guy in second. When you lose by a few ounces, you can't say Livescope necessarily beat a sight fisherman. It was that one of their fish weighed a little bit more. It's so tough to control that sort of thing. If you talk to anybody that fishes a lot of tournaments, they'll tell you to get as many top 10s as you can, and you'll eventually win one. You can't really go out there and just say that you're gonna land on all the right size fish. You can just go for big ones, and one of the times you're eventually going to hit the right big ones. So getting into that, I'm eventually actually going to make a video where I'm going to break down as much as I can of this season, but a little teaser to lead into all those thoughts that I was kind of putting out there, of that maybe Livescope isn't as strong of a competitor as you might think it is this year. is that look at the top 5 in the AOY. You don't have to believe me. You can look on it by yourself. It goes Kyle Welcher, Brandon Cobb, John Cox, Tyler Rivette, and then Drew Cook. There's only one live scoper in there. And he does, and one of his finishes, he wasn't live scoping at all. He was catching them real shallow down on Seminole. I haven't watched a whole lot of live this year, but Cox ain't out there live scoping them. Welcher ain't out there live scoping them. Cook's not out there live scoping them. Cobb's not out there live scoping them. Cobb, I feel like, at least has a little more of live scope in his arsenal, just from the part of the country that he does well in. But dude's a sight fisherman and a shallow water guy. So is Welcher, Cobb, and Cook, or Welcher, Cox, and Cook, along with Cobb. And then Rivette's kind of one of those all-around guys. But if Livescope is dominating the Elite Series, why is 4 out of the top 5 anglers off the Elite Series shallow water guys that don't use Livescope? That is what my point is when I say all this stuff. Some people brush it off and hate Livescope. I'm not a big fan of it personally. I could do without it. I still enjoy catching fish on it when I'm catching them on it, but it's more of a necessity to fish tournaments. But what I'm going to look back on later this year, I'm going to make a full video about it. I like to break down numbers and lay them out for everybody. We're going to break down and see how many top 10s. Sorry, my dog's digging a hole right beside me. But we're going to break down how many top 10s Livescope actually made this season, or if it won a few tournaments, but really 9 out of the top 10 were guys that weren't using it. And then to me, that more points out when a technique or a tool like that is actually truly a dominant resource in a tournament trail, or is it just when it's used enough, does it eke out a few wins? I don't know. Thought it was some interesting food for thought, and wanted to talk about that Sabine River tournament a little bit. I thought it was kind of interesting too on the Sabine River that so many guys did well. That was kind of what I was getting into earlier when I was talking about Summerall Run Over, and I got off on a tangent about that. But thought it was interesting this year that so many guys were fishing so close to takeoff that did well. There was it really didn't seem like there was any heroic runs that benefited anybody in that one. It seemed like, I think Scott Martin and Summerall ran way over to the other side of Galveston Bay, which is a stupid run. I wouldn't do it, and I know the area over there, but it didn't pay off for them at all. I think after day one, the 2 guys that had ran over there ended up with practically nothing. So yeah, just thought that was some interesting stuff, and that the Sabine really produced closer to takeoff this year, and which I do know from listening to live and everything, the water was really low there this year. So there were a lot of those areas that people really couldn't necessarily get back into. So that could have played a huge factor in the long runs. I know they talked multiple times about Christie's spot that he had ran to that he said he couldn't even get back into anymore. So maybe not, maybe so, I don't know. But I thought that on a fishery like that, when you see after like the 4th time that Bassmaster on a really tough fishery, the 4th time that Bassmaster comes there, all of a sudden now you're seeing guys like a majority of the top 10 fishing like close to takeoff. The guy that won fished there the entire tournament. So my mind always goes to, I wonder if it did affect the fish in that area. Was it like, did it restock that, or did it stock that area with better quality fish? Because the bayous in that saltwater don't generally kick out good sized fish. Or was he just fortunate enough that he eked through day one and then was able to feed off all the release fish? I don't know. Just thought it was pretty cool to look at all that stuff. But anyway, see you guys on the next video. Just enjoy talking about fishing. Subscribe to the channel.